What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more acid-techno. And we're going to start going through a 4-track EP from 2001, as you see, called The Sound of Smitten. Now, I've talked about this a lot, but I think mostly in my early videos. And shout out to Steve Smitten. Back when my YouTube channel was basically only doing acid-techno and hardcore, basically 90s rave music, and also tracks made more recently in those same genres, he had actually sent me an email saying, like, I think he wasn't on YouTube in terms of, like, having an account to comment. But yeah, he sent me an email saying it was really cool to see someone going through and talking about and, you know, sort of sharing the love for tracks on the label he ran for many years, and he was certainly involved in other releases on other labels and other labels more broadly, which is to say the origin of the Rootmaster label, run by Laurie Immersion, is also part of Steve Smitten's story. But yeah, he sent me a really nice message, and he just said it was nice to know that the tunes they made, which were just kind of what they wanted to hear and what they were feeling in the UK rave scene, the London scene in particular at the time, that they had made an impact on people and that people were still talking about them. So again, I absolutely was part of the generation of techno and acid music enthusiasts who not only had such tunes make an impact on me, but in the early days of me buying records, it wasn't always easy to find the acid techno that I was looking for, in part because some of the record shops I went to in Southern California didn't carry them, or like, you know, they'd have one or two tracks, or one or two records rather, and that was it. But the point is, I, along with Stay Up Forever, which was, I think, the main one that, you know, really got me into the London acid techno sound, Smitten and Rootmaster were the other two. Anyway, the point is, I have continued to react to acid techno, and obviously I do a lot more on my channel than in the early days. But the point is, we're going to go through this full EP, and I'm going to start, there's 4 tracks, and all of them are heavyweights, or from heavyweights in the genre, most of whom are still involved. Now, I don't think Laurie Immersion produces much these days, but he is absolutely one of the main players when it comes to mastering and, is it pressing? I don't know if it's cutting records or pressing records. Either way, he's very much on the technical side, and he doesn't just do that for techno releases. You know, I think he's, the Curve Pusher brand is a, you know, major player in record production and vinyl distribution. Anyway, the point is, one tune's by the Geezer. I don't need to introduce him on my channel. One of my all-time favorite, if not my, like, absolute favorite acid techno producer, Laurie Immersion, Dave the Drummer, and Chris LIberator, which, again, he needs no introduction either. And yeah, I decided I'm going to work backward. I'm going to start with the D track, and then do C, and then B, and then A. And the D track is Chris LIberator's remix of Phil Zero's tune Fat Lines. It's written like Chris LIberator Fat Lines, and then it says remix, original by Phil Zero. So I'm just going to list it Phil Zero, Fat Lines, Chris LIberator remix. But yeah, this one is, number one, a bit more melodic than a lot of acid techno tunes, but at the same time, it's still stomping, it's still wicked, and it is, in its own way, menacing. So it's a bit of a, like, hybrid track in terms of the vibe. But yeah, it just has this very catchy melodic riff that is a major part of the track. And yeah, ultimately, this was done in celebration of the 50th Smitten release. I don't think it went much longer than this. Now, to be fair, having said that, there was Smitten XS, which is like a slightly different flavor. It was a sub-label. And then even after Smitten officially died, there was, I think, a 10-release sub-label that came out a couple years later called, was it Smitten is Dead? I think it was Smitten is Dead. I have, I think, half of them. I think I have 5 of the 10, and I think I've reacted to at least a few of the remixes that came from that sub-label. But the point is, it was this legendary label and, I think, sound system that was part of the London scene during the formative period in the mid to late 90s. And as I said, this came out in 2001 and was the 50th Smitten release. So with no further talking, let's get into it and listen to Fat Lines, the remix by Chris LIberator. As I said, the original was apparently by Phil Zero, but I've never heard the remix of, or the original. I've only ever heard this remix, and away we go. heavy kick drum. Very metallic, buzzing bass line. bass line. But I love the tune for multiple reasons. One, it's just like a stomping good time. I really just imagine people kind of stomping around the dance floor. Now, to be fair, this is not one that I had right when it came out. I think it was a few years later when I picked it up. I want to say like 04, 05 maybe. So as far as I know, I don't think I ever played it at a party. Because again, in my original run of DJing, the last party I played I think was like late 03, something like that. Maybe early 04. And then it wasn't, again, for like another decade or so when I began playing a few parties, not nearly as regularly and, you know, a bit more like different, basically. They were different types of parties, meaning back in the 90s it was like, you know, you'd go to a checkpoint and then, you know, you'd go to another place to get another address and then eventually you'd go to the party. And I think a lot of that was done because in many cases they didn't really have permits or whatever. And then because of the LA laws where they tried to shut down rave parties by like making, you know, no music, no live music after 2 a.m. So like there were a lot of times when parties would get shut down and then, you know, that would make promoters lose money. And then they basically tried to kill the rave scene in LA. And then it's only in recent years that it's come back, though almost always like in venues where they have the permits and like whatever. The point is, starting in 2015, I started playing a few parties again. Now, although now, having said that, I think the last one I played was like 2019. It was a while ago. But the point is, I got this EP in that kind of middle period where I was still mixing, still buying records, but I wasn't playing parties. And again, I've told this story on Discogs and on my SoundCloud, but there was a period like 2005 to 2009 where I wasn't mixing as much, wasn't buying as many new records. And then in 2009 or so, I kind of got back into it and, you know, a couple years after that started my SoundCloud. And the rest, as they say, is history. In fact, probably not a couple years after that. I think it was like 2010. Nevertheless, the point is I very much enjoy all the tracks on here. And they do have this kind of old school, like, let's sum up the 90s in a few different tracks. And very much the Sound of Smitten. But yeah, I like it because it's heavy and stomping with the percussion. It's got that buzzing electric bass line the whole time. When the acid like layers over the top do come in, they're very snarling and cycling. And then it has that catchy synth melody, which almost kind of reminds me of like an 80s synth melody, but kind of like taken into the acid-techno world. So yeah, as I said, it's a bit more melodic and catchy than a lot of tracks, but it's in the context of this heavy, wicked, stomping acid-techno banger. So yeah, I like the blended feeling of this one. The atmosphere is great, and it's very like party acid is the best way I can put it. So yeah, top tune. Big shout out to Chris, of course. Shout out again to Steve Smitten for the label, and again for all of the involvement in Rootmaster and so on. So let me know what you think. As I said, we'll go through the rest of these. I'll probably do this like in order. So the next time I do an acid-techno reaction, we'll do Dave or Henry's Fat Arse track, which is very good. So yeah, let me know what you think, and I will see you for that. Peace.